I've been a trucker for various companies over the past 10 years. About 3 years ago, I was employed by a warehouse company in Kansas, handling shipments. Typically, I drove a semi-truck, which was the case on February 2nd. It was a cold Monday, the beginning of a busy week, and I had numerous loads to deliver. Determined to finish quickly, I began driving at 3 p.m. with the goal of reaching my destination that same night. I was adamant about avoiding a roadside sleepover. To expedite the journey, I maintained a speed slightly above the limit, pushing the semi to about 5 miles per hour over. After midnight, I started feeling the weight of fatigue, but with less than an hour to go, I convinced myself I could push through. My eyes were getting dry and heavy, making it a struggle to keep them open. To stay awake, I splashed some water on my hand and rubbed it on my face, which helped a bit. The road was completely dark except for my truck's headlights. I was the only vehicle around. As I reached for my water bottle, I suddenly noticed a figure in the distance, approaching quickly. I slammed on the brakes, bringing the truck to a near halt. With the truck slowed down, I could see the person more clearly. They were almost standing in the middle of the road, dressed in all black with a black scarf wrapped around their neck. What struck me was the unnaturally long neck. It was a bizarre and unsettling sight. Despite slowing down, I couldn't make out any facial features clearly. It was just a blur. As I got closer, I was about to roll down my window to see if he needed help. But before I could, he turned sharply and darted into the woods. Without pausing to think, I pressed the gas pedal and resumed my journey. Despite the eerie encounter, I was in a rush and couldn't afford to stop. About 20 seconds later, my heart started racing as the reality of what I had just seen hit me. I managed to calm down after a few minutes, but soon, something else happened. Back at my cruising speed, I saw another figure dart across the road. Initially, it looked like a large animal, but as I approached, I realized it resembled another person. This time, I didn't even slow down. I was too freaked out and just wanted to reach my destination as quickly as possible, even stepping on the gas a bit more. A few more minutes passed uneventfully, but my fatigue was worsening. I was swerving into the other lane occasionally, struggling to stay awake. With about 40 minutes left in my drive, I wasn't sure if I could make it. I began scanning for a place to pull over and rest. Eventually, I found a small gravel opening on the side of the road, likely meant for parking. I pulled the semi into it, parked, and leaned back to rest my eyes. I fell asleep for less than an hour before waking up abruptly to complete darkness. Unsure of what had awakened me, I had an uneasy feeling and decided to turn on the headlights. The lights illuminated the area in front of my truck, revealing the man with the black scarf standing there, just like I had seen earlier on the road. This time, I could see his face clearly. He had a wide, unsettling smile and his eyes were unnaturally wide open, staring directly at me through the windshield. Panic set in and I quickly turned the truck back on, pulling out of the clearing as fast as possible. I couldn't comprehend how this man had managed to walk the 10 miles from where I had last seen him. I didn't stop again until I reached my destination. Once there, I parked and immediately fell asleep in the lot, waking up early the next morning. Reflecting on the night, the only logical explanation I could think of was that my mind was playing tricks on me due to the exhaustion. However, I had never heard of such vivid and terrifying hallucinations, which is what continues to baffle and scare me to this day. I worked as a UPS driver for 2 years, and while it was generally a good job with decent pay, it had its challenging moments. In 2010, 2 years out of college, I was doing an 11 to 7 o'clock shift on a Thursday during the dead of winter. By 5 o'clock, it was already pitch dark. I lived in a small town in North Carolina, which wasn't exactly known for its charm. It wasn't ghetto or slummy, but it was far from being a nice area. My delivery routes often took me through this town, where the housing was quite strange. Some blocks had rows of houses and trailer homes spaced far apart, while others were completely desolate. This made deliveries time-consuming because the houses were so spread out. Deliveries were strategically mapped out, so I didn't waste time driving aimlessly. After a long day of deliveries across 3 different small towns, I found myself on one of those sparsely populated streets I mentioned. There were spaced-out trailer homes and small houses on one side and a forest on the other. It was a bit past 6 p.m., and my shift was nearing its end with only a few deliveries left. One house on the block required a signature for the package, meaning I couldn't just leave it on the doorstep. I pulled up in front of the house, went to the back of the truck, and retrieved one of the largest and heaviest boxes of the day. It was filled with small metal pieces rattling around inside, but I had no clue what was in it. My job was to lug the box to the front door, so that's what I did. The house didn't have a doorbell, so I knocked. The lights were off, and there was no car out front, but I hoped someone was home. After knocking a few more times, I saw the curtains move and heard footsteps approaching the door. There was a long, suspicious pause before the door finally cracked open. An older woman poked her head out, looking anxious. When I told her she had a package to sign for, she opened the door fully and signed the device with a shaky, sloppy signature. She asked me to help her carry the box into her room, which I expected. The moment I stepped into the trailer home, I was hit with a strong, unpleasant odor. Every home has a distinct smell, good or bad, but this one was awful. She led me through a tiny living room to a narrow hallway where I struggled with the box. She directed me to a door, opened it, and asked me to place the box in the closet at the back of the room. I asked her to turn on the light, but she said it didn't work. The room was nearly pitch black, with only a faint light from the living room illuminating it. I could barely see but managed to navigate the box inside. As I neared the closet, I noticed someone standing in the corner. I could make out the shape and saw movement, confirming it was a person. This person was clearly hiding, which made no sense and was deeply unsettling. I left the box where it was and walked back past the woman, saying, "Have a nice day." She started yelling at me to come back and help her, even calling me a piece of trash. I didn't know what she and the person in the closet were planning, and I wasn't about to find out. I quickly left the house, resumed my shift, and went home that night. That incident spurred me to start looking for a new job immediately. The eerie experience left me shaken, and I was determined to find a safer, better job as soon as possible. When I was younger, I used to drive a big rig during the summer to make some extra money. My main job was school, so summertime was perfect for getting behind the wheel and seeing some of the country while getting paid to roll across state lines. It sounded like a dream, and honestly, I'd fantasized about being a truck hauler in my youth. My parents, however, pushed me to go to college and do something else. Nonetheless, I got to satisfy my desire and drive every summer. Turned out to be such a cool gig that my wife came along as well. She even got her CDL so she could drive the truck if anything happened to me. It was a great little thing we had going and some of the most fun we've ever had. There's something beautiful about waking up to the unpredictable life on the road. However, there was one drive that made us second-guess the job. Honestly, it was the scariest thing that ever happened to us, both on and off the road. Nothing compares to the night we had outside of Tucson. The drive had been routine. We had brought a load down from Idaho and were headed back with a different trailer in tow. We were making good time, but a complication left us leaving Tucson later than we wanted. It was dark, and we only made it about an hour outside the city before we decided to pull over at a truck stop. We were both tired and wanted to start our return trip fresh. When we pulled into the truck stop, it was packed. Every single stall was filled, and even the lane space was crowded with vehicles parked illegally. It looked like they were weathering a storm. We did a U-turn through the lot and jumped back onto the highway, hoping to find a pullout large enough to accommodate us. Fortunately, we found a big, dusty stretch just off the highway. A nice wide dirt road took us about 100 feet off the highway and opened into a field. It looked like an outdoor recreation area where people unloaded their dirt bikes and quads. My wife said that once the sun was up, we'd probably see jumps everywhere. We got into our usual routine, checked the load to make sure everything was secure, and put a couple of cones behind the trailer just in case someone came ripping through. I checked the tires for lumps, punctures, and anything else while my wife filled out the mileage logs and did other light paperwork. After that, it was time to relax. We had a light dinner, played a card game, and then snuggled up to catch some sleep. We didn't even put a movie on. We just slipped away into the darkness. It was a quiet, still and perfect night. I remember how serene it was as we fell asleep because when we woke later, it was the exact opposite. The thing that woke me first was my wife shaking me and hollering that something was wrong. I sat up and looked around but couldn't see anything. We used a divider to separate the cab from the sleeping bunk in the back. Regardless, I could now hear what she was talking about. I could feel it too. Something was lightly making the truck rock back and forth. Now, I know what you're thinking. The truck and the trailer weigh tons upon tons, and you're right. It takes a lot to make a big rig shake, but it isn't impossible. A good wind can push the cab around and make the trailer wiggle like a big metal worm. Pothole will make the whole thing bounce. If someone is climbing up the side or back ladder or messing with the trailer hatch, you can feel it inside the truck. Subtle, but it's there. Now, if someone were to climb up the side step of the truck itself or climb up in the back where the hitch is, you can feel every single step. This, however, didn't feel like any of that. It felt like wind with something larger nudging the rig back and forth, coming from the ground. The only way I can describe it is like we were caught in a herd of animals, like goats or something, gently bumping into the truck just enough to make it move a little. I said this to my wife, who agreed. Then we deduced that we were technically in cattle country. Ranchers, particularly during monsoon season, have a lot of land where they can drive their cows through in Arizona. It sounds crazy, but it actually made sense to us in our sleepy state of mind. We laid there for a while, pretending we were going to go back to sleep. I actually kind of did for a bit, but my wife woke me back up again. This time, I could tell something was really wrong. We were really rocking now, and there was some kind of sound coming from outside like a whooshing wind but with a weird metallic echo. This whole night is impossible to describe. At this point, I got out of the bunk and grabbed my flashlight. I didn't want to peel the light blocker off the windows in the back, so I just pushed the divider over and peeked out through the windshield. I couldn't see any animals or moving bushes, just darkness. I found that weird because I could actually see different shades of black twisting into one another. It was like seeing some kind of special effect in real life. I turned the flashlight on and shined it through the windows, but I had to get close to see past the reflection. Beyond the glass, there was nothing, just dirt, weeds, and sparse cacti. Nothing reminiscent of an animal or swirling dark shapes like I'd seen before. My wife asked if anything was out there, and I told her no, not even a cloud of dust, which animals would definitely have kicked up for all the commotion we felt. Nothing was really happening outside. The second I clicked the flashlight off, the entire truck and trailer swayed so hard that I hit the wall of the cab and almost fell to the ground. My wife started screaming immediately. It felt like we'd been tossed out to sea or hit by a train, maybe both. I got back to my feet and grabbed the passenger seat in front of me for support and cover. I wanted to be able to scan the outside area without being seen. If the truck rocked like that again, it could hurt the hitching or mess up the cargo, causing trouble. I didn't bother with the flashlight now, as I could see pretty well with just the light of the moon. The desert makes a great canvas for things when you're looking for them in the dark. My wife asked if we should leave, and I told her probably. I just wanted to understand what the hell was going on. The truck didn't move again, but outside we could now hear something tapping, clanking vaguely like a stone against metal. My wife compared it to our little dogs skittering across the tile kitchen floor, the sound of claws clacking against the hard surface. That creeped me out more than anything for some reason. We sat in silence and waited, but we didn't have to wait long. As I looked through the passenger window, I saw movement by the tree stand we spotted earlier. I ducked down, squinted, and even considered getting my glasses. I didn't think we'd be able to find them in the dark, so I just stayed put and watched. Whatever was out there only moved between the trees at first, so I figured it had to be an animal. I was hoping for something big like a bull, cow, or horse, something I could believe maybe pushed on my truck. It took a few steps before breaking away from the tree line. When it did, I was sure I was looking at a person, a man carefully walking amongst the dirt and rocks. He was looking north, away from the truck and the trees. I whispered to my wife that there was someone out there. She almost had an aneurysm. She kicked off the blankets, found her shoes, and insisted that I get the truck going. If I didn't, she was going to. To this day, I don't really know why I asked her to please calm down and wait. We were both there. We were somewhat safe inside the cab. Something strange was definitely going on, and my logic demanded some kind of answer. She wasn't happy with it but agreed to wait a bit longer. She came up and took a place next to me in the passenger seat. We watched as this guy strode away from the trees, stopped, and then started making really weird motions like interpretive dance or something. He only did it for a second, not even long enough for us to comment on it, then pointed over to some stones. As he pointed, it looked like he was looking back and forth between the rocks and our truck. Then he was gone. It wasn't like we turned away or blinked and he vanished. It was like he was never out there. What had looked like his pointed silhouette dissipated into a shapeless shadow under the moon. We went back and forth for a while about what we saw and if it was real. We'd been doing these summer hauls for a couple of years, and nothing like this had ever happened to us. Now that our truck was still and the stranger outside had vanished, exhaustion really hit us. We needed to be resting to make good time, so we agreed to catch a few hours and hit the road before dawn. We'd take turns driving all day while the other slept in the back and still stay on schedule. The rest of that night was one of the most peaceful I've ever had. I slept soundly, didn't toss or turn, and didn't wake up until I needed to. There weren't any sounds or commotion. I felt centered for whatever reason. My wife said the same. When I took over driving, I felt as good as ever and couldn't explain why we had been so spooked the night before. Still, the longer I spent behind the wheel and the closer we got to home, the more I started thinking about the weird man and the bumping of the truck. In all our travels, nothing like it had ever happened. When we did our next summer run, we asked around and nobody knew what we were talking about. Still, we didn't drive that route again. We avoided it like the plague. I guess we're haunted now, but as far as hauntings go, this one isn't too bad. We still do our summer drives, still love life on the road, and still believe that whatever happens will come out all right. I've been a truck driver since I was 25, and I've done a lot of night drives, accumulating my fair share of odd experiences. I did deliveries for various companies, often driving across states to make shipments to receiving companies or stores. One day, I had to drive from one side of California to the other to deliver a trailer full of wooden furniture. Much of the drive was through open desert roads. It was going to be many hours, and I had a late start to the day, so I knew most of my drive would be in the dark. Given the nature of these desert roads at night, how straight they are and how little traffic there is, I could push the truck a little faster than usual. When I saw the flashing rear lights of a car on the horizon, I had to hit the brakes extra hard to bring the truck to a stop. I finally pulled up behind an old Chevy Impala parked on the side of the road in the desert dirt, with its hazards on. I got out of my truck to be a good Samaritan and check if they needed help. I walked over to the car and tapped on the window but got no response. Bending down to look inside through the tinted windows, I didn't see anyone. After checking all the seats, I could confirm the car was empty. I looked out into the cool, dark desert, but couldn't see more than 20 yards ahead. Feeling especially helpful, I returned to my truck, grabbed a heavy-duty tactical flashlight from the toolbox under the passenger seat, and turned it on. The flashlight revealed an abandoned gas station on the side of the road, which I hadn't noticed before. The fill-up or parking area was all dirt with only 2 gas pumps. Behind them was a small building, probably an old quick-stop store. It made sense that whoever owned the car might be in that building. I approached the front door, which was permanently jammed open, and shined the flashlight inside. It was a big convenience store, now empty and abandoned. I called out to let anyone know of my presence and offer help. The slightest echo in the room gave me chills. Then, I heard something, probably a shoe scraping the floor on the opposite side of the room behind some shelves. I called out again, offering help. I then heard a deep, heavy whisper saying, "Get out." I immediately understood what was said but couldn't understand why. Hearing heavy breathing from one corner of the room made me hurry out. On my walk back to the truck, I heard a woman screaming. There were at least 5 seconds of confusion, not knowing if what I heard was real. I ran to my truck and called 911, too scared to go back inside. They asked for my exact location, but all I could say was that I was by an abandoned gas station on some desert road. They asked me to stay on the line to better describe my location, but suddenly the car in front of me turned on and sped down the desert road. I didn't even notice the driver get into the car. Running back into the building to see if anyone was still there, I kept 911 on the line. I went to the back section where I heard the voice and breathing, and I was mortified to see a fresh pool of blood on the floor. I explained to the operator that I believed I stumbled into a crime scene. Eventually, state troopers arrived. They asked for any information I could provide: the license plate number, what the suspect looked like, and what I thought happened. I described the car as a black early 2000s Chevy Impala and recounted hearing a man tell me to get out before a woman screamed as they left the building. There was no body left behind, but I had a few ideas of what might have happened. The state police likely took blood samples and other evidence, but I couldn't provide much more assistance. Shamefully, I didn't have a dash cam at that time to get the license plate number, but I installed one in my truck the very next week. This was a once-in-a-lifetime experience that will always haunt me.